And I feel like we can tackle that conversation this morning. So, Matt, did we fix you?
I hope so.
Yes.
Now, the problem is I'm trying to do the simulcast, and because of your interactions with Mark Zuckerberg, we're unable to simulcast on
Oh, God.
Facebook. So if anybody's interested in watching me just sit in my house, you can absolutely just go on over to the Stone Tree Creative Facebook page or YouTube page and watch this. Regardless, we're recording it and we'll have the replay up for you at some point. But over the weekend, Mercury retrograde, people. So don't make any big purchases or sign contracts. The port in my phone has decided to die. Can't charge, can't use audio. So it's a very delicate situation right now. I'm going to try not to move too much and disturb anything. So yeah. Hi, it's a great end of the week. Good to see you guys.
We are just winning this week, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Great strides forward. Good morning, Kat and Becca. How are you two?
I'm good. Tired, but good. I'm joining Becca on the 6 a.m. train this week because I'm over in Phoenix.
Oh, man.
Hey.
Y'all have both my sympathies. I'm so sorry. All right. Well, since we're just a little bit late this morning, let's go ahead and get the ball rolling. And I will say good morning, everybody, and welcome to Morning Walk with the Artist Forge, where we learn to think like artists. My name is Nicole York. I will be your host, of course, with our co-hosts and simulcast leader, Matt Stagliano, our other moderators and co-hosts, the lovely and talented Kat Ford Coates and the amazing Becca Bjorky. And today we are joined by cosplay photographer and 3D artist extraordinaire Dustin Balkema as we chat about self-portraiture. And the great thing about self-portraiture is you don't need to be a portrait photographer to create a self-portrait. You can create one in clay, you can paint one, you can make one out of textiles. Self-portraiture has no limits. The only purpose is to communicate something about you as the artist, as a person, however you want to explore that idea. So we're going to be talking about self-portraiture this morning since we were not able to do the live stream last night and break down some self-portraits, with the purpose of just making sure we are all armed with this information, since right now in our Facebook group, we are running the May challenge, which is self-portraiture. And of course, there is a pinned post in the Facebook group so that folks can create a self-portrait, share it in that discussion, pin it in the comments, you just stick it right in there, and then we can go and look and break those down and chat about them. And then the self-portraits that get the most responses and hearts and likes, etc., those top 5 will go into the final live stream, which will be able to happen, I promise. And then we will break them down, and that person will have the banner image in the group for the month. They will get an interview with our own Matt Stagliano for the Artist Forge podcast, and we'll also have an interview on the blog with some of their incredible images and backlinks, all that good stuff. So we just want to celebrate y'all as artists. And of course, with this month being self-portraiture, we wanted to talk about that a little bit because it can be scary waters to jump into self-portraits. They are not a thing. I have only ever really taken maybe 3 of myself in my entire photography career, and 2 of them are highly stylized, which is nice because it means I can hide within a character a little bit. So I'm going to definitely dive into the struggle on my part, but I want to acknowledge that it's not always easy and not everybody has jumped into these waters. So I want to start by asking the panelists today, what do you guys think of self-portraiture? How do you approach it? Do you have any kind of general thoughts about self-portraiture, or is it something you've wanted to stay away from? And for those of us who do them, how do we think about it? How do we approach it? Is there any mindset you think you have to have? I'm just curious. What are your thoughts in general?
Okay, well, this is an interesting one. So for me, it's interesting for me at least. I don't know that I've ever looked at shooting myself, um, as a way to produce content. Um, and personally, I think it's actually a confidence thing for me, really. I've kind of gotten over the fears, of being on camera, video, YouTube videos, maybe I wouldn't consider them really portraits, but like shooting myself for YouTube thumbnails, that kind of stuff. I've gotten there, but as far as like actually planning a shoot, and doing that, of myself is kind of been difficult. And I love seeing everybody else's self portraits. And so there are times where I think that, like, oh man, you should get out and do this, but it's definitely been difficult. So I kind of ride, I believe, what I would consider the confidence train on that one. And at some point, it'll be just like YouTube was for me in the beginning, and something that I just dive into and learn to love.
Where do you think the disconnect is in that confidence between a portrait of you and then the photos like your profile image right now, which is obviously a fantastic shot, and I think really kind of represents the type of work that you do and all of that stuff. Between that kind of thing and what you're thinking in your head of as a self portrait.
So the disconnect for me. So I shoot a lot of cosplay, what I would consider cosplay portraiture, really, um, and I think it's maybe a lack of inspiration to get creative with my own look and personality and things of that nature. Um, I don't know that it's really I'm not exactly sure where that disconnect truly stems from. It's just I view I don't view myself as such a creative subject as shooting a cosplayer that's in full getup.
That's so interesting. I wonder, I know Kat is an amazing self-portraitist, and I wonder if anybody today might have any insights into what makes it so difficult, because I can understand you a little bit there, and I know my two my two favorite photos of myself that are self-portraits are both highly stylized, and in one of them I'm a cyborg, and in the other I'm kind of a witch. So when those happen, then it feels like there's really a purpose to be taking the photo. And I suppose it feels difficult for me. Maybe it's that idea of stripping everything away and being vulnerable that makes it harder to adjust to the idea that there's anything there worth seeing or capturing. I don't know. Do you think that
Um,
has anything to do with it, Kat?
oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Yes, of course it does.
I'll
uh,
agree.
one of the things, like, as a photographer, right, especially as a portrait photographer, one of the biggest objections that you get when you're just speaking with someone candidly is, either, oh, me, not me, just the kids, or I need to do XYZ before you can take a photo of me. Because here's the thing, photo's permanent. And we all have this idealized version of ourselves that we want to show up as and be seen as throughout our lives, regardless of age, except for, like maybe if you're 6, right? It probably doesn't matter as much. Um, but as let's just say, like from developed brains, right forward, there is this persona that we have that we want to be seen as. And when somebody brings up a camera, that's when I'm overweight or I'm wrinkled, I don't have makeup on, I am just wearing the laundry pile instead of, whatever the thing is, right? Like all of the things, the imperfections, the flaws, the why it's not right now immediately go off in our head because we understand innately that because it's a photo, it's going to outlive us. Like when somebody talks about who I was, this might be what they show, right? Instead of all of the different ways you want to perfect and control every last detail and all of the things, because you're not the one behind the camera. So then when it comes time to actually being the one behind the camera, but also in front of the camera, you want to have a purpose for it, because without a purpose, then it's just vanity. And if it's just vanity, does that make me a bad person? Like, no, it doesn't make you a bad person. It means that you're valuable enough as a human being to be photographed, period, the fuck, the end. I don't give a
Ugh.
shit what you look like in the moment, because it's just about being worthy. And like, getting to the setup of a self-portrait can feel really heavy, even if it's like in a t-shirt and jeans, because then you want to think about all of the different variables and like, oh, what kind of lighting would I use, and da, 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 da. Like, it's an act of self-care to photograph yourself. And if it feels like vanity, okay, it feels like vanity. That doesn't mean it is. Is that true? Right? Like, it's simply an act of self-care and exploration. And whether that's exploration as a technician, as an artist, whatever that looks like for you, you can give it a name, right? Oh, I'm learning new lighting techniques, or I wanted to work with this dress, or I wanted to embody this version of myself that wasn't scared to show the fuck up.
I love it. Absolutely, right there. Just pretty much killed every single damn one of my excuses. Thanks for that.
And bow. No.
Mic drop.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned also, Kat, that vanity part, because it can be really difficult to divorce that idea from a photo. And I was thinking, as you were saying that and asking that question, I was thinking to myself, why am I so afraid even to lean into that feeling? You know what I mean? To go, okay, so what if it is? And if it was, why is that such a scary thing? Is that why is that so bad? What is it about that feeling that makes me want to run away? You know what I mean?
I mean, if are you actually asking, or is it just kind of a riff thought question?
I mean, both. If you have an answer for that, like, I'm sure it's valuable, absolutely, but it's also kind of a question of why do we feel like some feelings are ones we don't want to feel, right? Like,
So, okay, there's a couple of levels to that. One, there's probably some point in your childhood where you felt really great about yourself and maybe said something or behaved in a certain way, and someone, an adult, a parent, whatever, like, probably shamed you for it, or said, "Don't do that right now. God, Nicole, please just sit." Right? Like, as a kid, and we just automatically absorb and take that feeling and say, "Oh, okay, that's bad. I never want to feel that again. I don't want to be looked at that way, because now vanity bad." Right? Um, and I actually liken it a lot to addiction as well, something like vanity, because it can be something that we do crave, because maybe it's missing in our lives in some way, shape, or form, that admiration or desire in some way, shape. Eh, and when we look at it from a space of addiction, all addiction is the avoidance of a feeling. And now that feeling can have physical ramifications, like 11 out of 10 for sure. But whether it's cigarettes, alcohol, emotions, any of it is simply avoiding a discomfort. And oftentimes, what we don't realize when we're avoiding a feeling is that all we're avoiding is discomfort. What is the discomfort sourced from? And when you can face that issue, like, where did that come from? Whether it's childhood, whether it's trauma, like, at the end of the day, it's simply about looking at it and accepting it for what it is.
who, okay. So I have to respond to that because that was super, super insightful. And right when you said that, that was a good punch in the chest for me because as a kid, um, I was out of my family anyway. I was the larger than life personality in my family. And I was the one who generally would get trotted out for the entertainment of guests. You know, my parents would say, Nikki, come do the thing, or come, you know, show people your whatever it is that you do the flip or whatever. And okay, so that's fine. However, I would also get teased a lot by my family because from the time I was little, I was apparently in love with my own reflection. I would look at myself. My mom said she could sit me down in front of a mirror and I would just play with myself for hours. And of course, that's when I was a baby. But as I got older, if I saw my reflection in something, I would always look at it. And so they made fun of me for that. They're like, oh, that's not reflective, Nick. You can't see yourself in that one, you know. Right?
I know this. Yes.
Yes, yes. And so now that may be the reason that those kind of 3 portraits of me, the one that you see here, and then the other 2 that are highly stylized, that may be the reason those are the only ones I have taken in maybe 15 years of photography, because I'm completely comfortable sharing photos of myself where I look like an ass or making goofy faces at the camera um, or kind of making myself, I guess, more relatable, trying to not look as pretty or whatever, you know, those ones, I can make fun of myself perfectly easily, but trying to take a photo of myself where I would look at that and say, I love that, or that's beautiful, or whatever. Yeah, those feelings of like, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Absolutely. I never thought about the fact that those might have been tied to childhood experiences, but I think you're right.
Oh, for sure. I'm actually trying to find a recent self-portrait that I took that's sort of on a different vein. Normally my self-portraits are kind of like the ones that you see here. You know, there's more of a serious look. There's some angles, that kind of thing. A little, I don't know, more on the serious front. And I recently took one where I was just jumping around in a fringe dress and my hair's going all like wonky town. And when I originally took it, I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm jumping up and down in my studio like a freaking crazy person. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I kind of like this. It's got this cool, like, go-go vibe to it. Okay, right on. But it's definitely like way outside of the norm of what I create. And I realized that by creating those boundaries around how I photograph myself, it's almost like being at square one and not taking them in the first place, because now I'm only going to shoot myself this way because that's the only way I want to be seen, and that's just doesn't represent like all of the aspects of who I am. And I mean, I'm a Gemini. There's already like a gajillion of me in my head. So like why only celebrate this one aspect? So what I've been trying to do lately with that is go into just different archetypes of who is Cat and show up in that way. Um, and yeah, so I'll put it up here in a second, but that's been an interesting thing to explore. So it's not just about the, you know, the intimate head, you know, the thoughtful, the compassionate, the regal, the whatever. It's also about like the goofy and the fun and the soft and the feminine and like all of the different things, or even to process like an emotional component too, like if I've lost someone or if someone is born, or you know, like try and create a range of work that is the photo evidence of me feels really powerful. Like I don't have children, so like I will be forgotten like 2.7 days after I die. Like I would much rather create a legacy of work that allows the impact of what I've created with students, with clients, with friends, with family to sort of live on. And like I find that to be very valuable in my life.
That is fantastic. And I'm never gonna forget you. So whichever one of us goes first, I'm carrying you around with me. So I just felt like you should know that. All right, so that was fantastic, and I think we've had a couple really great looks into the different approaches and the different feelings regarding self-portraiture. And so I'm curious for Matt and Becca. I mean, obviously, Dustin and I both a little bit hesitant to go and do something that's not like, hey, here's the public me, right? Or whatever. Obviously, a little more uncomfortable with that. Matt and Becca, I wonder, what are your feelings around self-portraiture? How do you approach it and how do you think of it?
Basically, I approach it with paralyzing fear and bottomless shame. So it's it's really, really hard for me. I'm trying to get better at it, but it is something that feels completely unnatural. So everything that you guys have talked about for the past 26 minutes is, just hitting me really hard. I struggle with it mainly because I I have this feeling that putting myself out there is only going to cause ridicule when it comes to photographing myself. Shitty picture, you don't look right, my hair is bad, my skin's bad, I'm fat, I'm tall, I'm short, I'm like whatever, right? It doesn't represent me. I always feel like no matter what mind state I'm in, I'm not going to be able to capture that. So that being said, I'm forcing myself to do more and more self-portraits. One, to get over that fear. Two, to get past the shame, and really start to explore. It's not the picture that I'm making. I'm exploring the feelings that come from inside me as to why I feel this way. So, well, I certainly don't publish a lot. I do take self-portraits, and they're not just kind of selfies. I feel like when I take a picture of just me trying to look good, I could do that with my phone. But when I'm exploring an actual self-portrait where I'm using my camera and I'm using a set and I'm using lighting, it is less about the outcome and more about the process of me going through it. Only because I know that the more that I do that, the better that I will feel, one, about the process, and two, about myself, because I'll just come to a better understanding of who I am. It's just a long, rocky road to get there. And I don't know why it's necessarily that difficult for me to take pictures of people all the time, but it's a thing in me that is just more difficult. I don't know if that's because I know myself better and I'm trying to capture something and I'm not seeing what it is that I like. I don't know if it's that I don't feel creative in front of the camera. I'm not giving an expression that brings any sort of reaction from anyone. I don't know. And this is the reason why I continue to do it, is to try to chip away at the unknowing and try to understand myself a little bit more. So that's my approach to it. Have I done them? Yes. Do they come out better than I ever expect? All the time. It still doesn't take away the fact that it's a real struggle for me to create them.
I really love looking at self-portraiture as a journey of self-understanding. And I wonder if there are any other ways, Matt, that you feel like you're able to express yourself and understand yourself without those reservations. Because I know for me, when I'm writing, that is a journey of self-discovery all the time. And when I'm journaling as well, obviously that's a place where my unfiltered thoughts can go. And so I have no fear doing that. And obviously, my books are out there for the world to read, and those are all pieces of the inside of me. So, why does that feel for me less scary than the photo? And I was just wondering if you have any other ways that you feel like you can really openly explore or express yourself that don't have those feelings that photos seem to bring up.
Yeah, I think writing, music creation, playing music or creating music, that is a big thing for me. Doing anything with my hands, any sort of expression with my hands, whether that's woodworking or building or landscaping or anything where I'm actually creating, gets a lot out of me. I think the issue with self-portraits for me is a deep-seated childhood level um, shame, body shame, perfectionism, all the things, a lot of pressures from when I was younger that just carry over. I see them, I'm aware of them, I deal with them the best that I can, but it doesn't stop the fact that it makes it harder to get to where I want to be with self-portraiture. Um, because what I see is not what the world sees. I know that, but doesn't change the fact that I see it. So it's harder for me to do that. I think when I'm not in front of the camera, it's easier for me to create and direct and manage and do all the things, connect with people, teach people, whatever it is. It's just more difficult for me to put me in front of the camera for a still photo. Video, no problem. Photo, yeah, I really don't know what it is. Weird things in my brain, but something to continue to analyze. This is why I just continue to work at it. You suck at it at the beginning, but the more you do it, the better it's going to get. And that's kind of the approach that I'm taking.
For sure. Oh man, it's interesting how deeply something so simple can get into our psyche and just reveal the fact that this process is not simple at all, and really even gives a deeper respect for the people who do sit in front of the camera. Anytime you go to get your portrait taken by somebody else, even, I mean, knowing how difficult it is for us photographers sometimes to get in front of that camera just makes me have even more empathy and respect for the folks I have photographed, because they're obviously rock stars. And also, before I poke Becca a little bit, I wanted to just bring up this contrast between myself and a friend of mine who is such a lovely person. She also really loves herself and she thinks she's beautiful, and she is beautiful, but she's comfortable with that. And she has no problem being like, yeah, I'm so pretty, which is one of my favorite aspects about her, because I admire that. I admire that she can admire herself and not feel any shame in that. And I wish that I had that, and I wish more of us did. And I wish that we could help more people feel that, which is such a beautiful thing about photography, um, in particular. And then this process of self-portraits, because maybe when we get to the point where we really can explore ourselves, and do that honestly and with vulnerability, maybe we can get to a place like my friend, where we look at ourselves and we love ourselves unreservedly. I think that would be such a beautiful thing. So Becca, what about you? Do you have any thoughts around self-portraiture? And if you do, and you do self-portraiture ever regularly, how do you approach it? All that kind of good stuff.
So I've kind of had a shift in approach to self-portraiture. And the shift is that I used to take so many self-portraits, so many, like not a full, 365 project, but like years on years on years in self-portraits. And now I don't. And I don't know what caused that shift. And I think a lot of it aligned just with the shift in my art form further and further away from photography. I mean, I barely ever touch a camera these days. And of course that lends a sense of ease and of course rawness and authenticity to the creation of self-portrait when it is done with a camera in a way that I think is different than illustration. I think illustration and any form of more what is the term I want? I don't know. Not photographic art, I suppose, presents its own, kind of vulnerability and rawness and how you choose to create yourself fully from scratch in a very different way. And maybe that's really what the difference is there for me, where it is less about documentation and more about fully crafting that perspective if I'm doing it without a camera. But I mean, the development for me of learning to take self-portraits and being very emotionally tied to self-portraits, a lot of it developed through puberty for me. And puberty came in and hit me across the face with a baseball bat so hard, and I learned to be vain for the first time in my life. And you guys already talked about vanity a little bit, but I was enchanted by this concept of being able to control the perspective through which people saw me, because I'd been such an ugly duckling. I was a funny looking kid. I was goofy. I was not popular. And suddenly I could be pretty. and I could choose how people saw me. And if I wanted to present myself as pretty, or if I wanted to present myself as something else, or if I wanted to be emotional, if I wanted to be conceptual, I could completely control that perspective for an audience in a way that I couldn't do it in person. And it was exciting and enrapturing, and I loved it. And it was almost, like writing a journal or writing poetry or something, and being able to expose myself through a creative means, through an art form that I just couldn't get enough of. And I don't know, something that desire to create in that way doesn't really exist for me anymore. And I wouldn't be so conceited as to say that all my artwork now is a form of self-portraiture, because it contains some emotional piece of me, which it does, but not to the degree that it would still be a self-portrait. So yeah, there's been a shift. There's been a shift, and maybe it is on some deeper level tied to some sense of vanity, that I'm just uncomfortable with aging or with my, postpartum ×3 body. But I don't feel like I need to control that view of myself in that same way. I'm comfortable being who I am, and I'm comfortable having things like what I'm known for, my value, my worth, not being necessarily tied to my physical identity.
Ooh, okay. There were a lot of things there that I wanted to grab onto, but what you just said, I feel like I really have to address, because I have started feeling that shift within myself as well. And I actually recently shared a kind of manifestation of that, which is that I've become less and less interested with capturing imagery that is traditionally just pretty, and allowing just pretty, or even maybe even beautiful, allowing that to be the sole recommendation for the art. And I want to see more now things that are battered, things that have bruises, things that are sunburned and wind chapped. And I noticed in some recent photo shoots that I tend to show up with a little tiny makeup bag that has some, essentially it's a bruise kit, but I want to make people's knuckles look like they've just been in a fight, and I'm putting dirt all over them, and I want scars. And there's something to me in all of the signs of a struggle, I guess, or of having fought to get to the place where that photo was taken, that I'm really, you use the word enchanted. I think that's a great word to use in this circumstance. And I'm wondering now how much of that is tied to me seeing the signs of life in my skin. I mean, as I get older, and as the kind of, I guess it's a transition between the kind of beauty that you accept in youth, right? That kind of young and fresh faced and nubile and all of those things, that type of beauty, and the type of beauty that is more mature and that has learned wisdom and that has gone through struggles and all of those things. And that leaves marks on you. And so that makes me, maybe it's that shift in mindset between those kinds of beauty and accepting that one is not higher than the other, but one I identify more with now, and I need to be able to express or to explore that. I feel like I kind of lost the train of where I was going with this, but I don't know if I'm making sense. You'll have to tell me if you identify with that at all.
Yeah, totally. And sorry for the very loud children in the background. I love a pretty, not pretty, messed up, bloody, scarred up character. I love that. I love that. And I think there's definitely a sense of that connection and identity. I mean, so I've been seeing this like trend on TikTok and Instagram recently, and I would be curious if anyone else feels this way. But it's a bunch of artists, and it's like I heard that all artists look like their artwork. Do I look like my artwork? And it's got some song or whatever. And I wonder how true that is for other artists, including photographers. Does our artwork resemble us on a subconscious level? And I think a lot of it, I mean, yeah, we make art because it matters emotionally to us. It's something we connect to. So I think there's definitely something there.
Ooh, so interesting. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about how we feel about self-portraiture, but now I want to know, when you get ready to take a self-portrait, since everybody has done it at least in one form, what are some things that you're considering or thinking about? What is your actual approach? Because as we were just discussing this, I had an image pop into my head. So now I have to make it, of if I was going to take a self-portrait of something that I feel, of something that feels very deeply connected to me, particularly at this point in my life, what would it be? And I would not actually really be in the photo much at all. So I'm really interested to explore that idea now, because it is a conceptual piece. But how do you go about approaching taking a self-portrait? Do you think for a while about what it is about yourself you want to convey and how you're going to communicate that? Or do you just say, fuck it, I'm just going to set everything up and get in front of a camera and see what happens? How do you go about making some of those creative decisions?
This is where I really struggle, because I feel like I'm not as creative, right? I'll come up with a concept and not be able to execute it because I get paralyzed locked in that it's not perfect. So a lot of times what I'll do is just set up a camera and just start taking pictures, set up an intervalometer, start taking pictures, start posing, stop, see what I like, what I don't like, change a couple of things, add something in, take something away, change the lighting, change it to black and white, whatever it might be. I try to just keep moving forward with it without a real concept, because then I might see something that I want to explore a little bit more. So I really do go into it with a blank canvas sort of approach. And I know that there's a lot of folks that go about it in a much different way. They've got a theme or an outfit or an emotion that they want to explore. For me, it just tends to be typically what I'm wearing, and then whatever's around me, what can I start to create from that? Not only does it help stimulate a little bit of creativity, but it also doesn't give me a sense that I'm not reaching what I set out to do. I remove the pressure of performance. I remove the pressure of production and just get into the act of creation, so that it's not focused on the end product, with the exception of I'd like to come out of this with a self-portrait. I just don't approach it saying, it needs to be a self-portrait of me walking this way or looking this way or emoting this way. I just start to shoot and see where it takes me.
Yeah, it takes away the pass fail, right? Because we're already judging ourselves harshly enough, even going through that imagery, right? Like, so attaching a concept or a theme to it can seem like that's just making that pass even harder. And so being able to just show up exactly as you are and create something visually interesting that's meaningful for you, uh, really becomes like that end game. Now, does that mean that you can't say like, okay, I'm going to try this stylized piece? That's why I think it's interesting, Nicole, like the pieces that you have created when you have allowed yourself to shoot self portraits have been like character driven, right? So you're creating sets and makeup and concepts with it. Um, that to me feels like really like, man, that sounds really, really damn hard. When it could just be simply about showing up and just photographing what is present, but that leads down to purpose and all the things. So that's where those choices are made, I guess. But yeah, I like that you take the pressure of the pass fail off, Matt. I do a lot of that too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like it may even make it easier for a lot of people to just be willing to show up if there isn't any kind of grade or report card or whatever at the end. And I wonder, it's interesting, Kat, you mentioned, when I do those conceptual pieces, that it seems like a lot of work. And interestingly enough, even though it definitely can be, because that might be me looking at myself in the mirror in the bathroom for 40 minutes trying to get a good wound on my face so I can show some cyborg mech through the injury, or like building a bunch of props so I can put together a set. In reality, although the actual work is more, it feels so much safer, I guess, to create a character that embodies some piece of me, but maybe not the whole, and to hide inside of that, I guess, or to allow that character to be what's being photographed and not me. And even though that character absolutely embodies some piece of me, the cyborg one, for many reasons, but also partially because I grew up fantasy and sci-fi. I grew up with those being huge influences in my life, and always been a part of me that wants to be a fighter, right? Strong and powerful, and who will keep going even when things look hopeless, and all of that stuff. And that has always been something I wanted to have be true about myself. And so that is absolutely a representation of that hope, or that desire, or that piece of me that I hope exists. And it feels just, for some reason, even though the work beforehand is definitely more, it feels safer somehow, I guess, to hide inside of there.
No, and I think that is that thing, right? Because it is about excuse me, creating that whole scene to where it's not only about you, it's about this story and this character and all of these other components where, you know, you can be an aspect of yourself, but it's not all of yourself showing up fully to be analyzed and viewed and all of the things, right? Whereas when I shoot, I typically strip all of that stuff away, and it is about like, no, I'm completely okay being open and straight, right front and center here. And so that's where that intention comes into play, which I really like. It would be interesting to say, like, if we switched roles, what that would look like. Like if I, self-portrait adventure is due today too. Damn it. Uh, took an opportunity to say, okay, like, you know, fairy princess 6-year-old cat shows up. What does she look like? Uh, or, you know, garden witch, or, you know, insert version of me here, and like going full tilt, and then having you show up and just simply be like, as Nicole, how does she want to be seen today, without all of the bells and whistles and makeup and all the things, uh, just to see what we did with that.
Well, I feel like that's a gauntlet thrown, Kat. And now I have to pick up and do that challenge. Maybe we should do that.
Maybe we should. I'm like, I don't have a tripod. Shit. I'll be back after the 23rd.
Put
We'll
it on your
figure it
car.
out.
Put the camera on your car. Put it on a pile of books. No excuses.
All right.
All right. Okay. I'm going to start with the conceptual one because it's now digging a hole in my soul that I have to make, but we're going to do that. We'll talk. So Erica has joined us this morning. Erica, would love to hear your thoughts.
Good morning. I'm going to apologize in advance. I feel like my phone is cutting in and out, and I have only a few minutes before a client comes. But I just wanted to share. I think I have more self-portraits than I care to even admit. I started out doing it simply as a way to either test my lights or try new concepts, rather than using the scary, ugly doll that I have in my studio. And so I have a ton, but my favorites, and when my self-portraiture really started to take a turn, was when I tried to tell my story, tell different aspects of who I am. Because I feel that, you know, everybody makes assumptions about other people. And um, I wanted to use the best means that I had. I am a decent writer, not a great writer at all, and you know, definitely not an illustrator or anything like that. So I used the means that I felt comfortable with to tell different aspects of my story, and I love going through that process. And you know, they're all very different and all very. Some are fun and funny. Some are deep. Some are just silly, but they all tell a different part of my personality and my story in a way that I couldn't just come out and say. So that is my primary use, I guess, for self-portraits beyond just practicing techniques.
Yeah, I love that idea, Erica, of exploring those different facets of yourself, which is, I think, my general approach when I do end up taking portraits of me, is what piece can I show? Because I do have an kind of inherent belief that there is no photo that can ever capture all, because we're just such multifaceted and complex beings. And so it definitely seems easier in my head to approach it from how do I express or explore this piece of myself. And then when you see those things as a body of work, there certainly seems to be then a keyhole through which to look into somebody. Um, and I think that that's a really interesting way to approach the idea in general. And when you're doing those things, Erica, where that's not just playing with lights, but you really are trying to capture some facet of yourself, do you have any kind of mental process that you go through to try to think of how you want to express that? Or is it one of those things like Kat and Matt were talking about, where you kind of show up and see where the experience leads you?
So I'm definitely a planner. So so I do plan it, and I'm again going to be quick because my client just pulled up. But I do, like, I think of the story I want to tell, and then from that point, I imagine the picture in my head, and then create it from there. So again, it depends on what story I'm trying to tell. Um, how the lighting is going to be, how the props, the whatever else is going to be in the picture with me, whoever else is going to be in the picture with me, and the idea and the story develops from there.
That makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely identify with that. As we're nearing the end of our hour, we've covered a lot of ground today, but I would want to ask, as a kind of final thought, if we could explain what we feel the value or the importance of a self-portrait is, what do you think that would be? And I'll wait to share mine, but what do you think that is? Like, if we were going to encourage folks, try to give them a reason why they should take a self-portrait, not go visit a photographer or anything else, but a self-portrait, whether that is, you are a photographer and you can take that, or you are an oil painter, or whatever media is your specialty. Why should somebody go off and create a self-portrait?
I think of it the same way that I talk to my clients, right? We're capturing a moment in time. We're capturing a facet of you that you want to see for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter who's taking the picture. If we just happen to be taking a picture of ourselves, we're the client, right? So why not try to capture that? For me, self-portraits are kind of like journaling, insofar as it's just an illustration of where we are, what we're feeling, who we're interacting with, our state of mind at that moment. So self-portraits are, just capturing that. I think people including myself, put too much pressure on what it's going to look like, where it's going to go, how it's going to be published. You don't have to do that. And you don't publish your journal a whole lot. So why would you necessarily publish a lot of these self-portraits? However, I think it's important to our mental health and, like Kat was saying earlier, self-care, to be able to take pictures of ourselves and value and love what we see. So for me, therein is the importance of it. Clearly, I still struggle with it, but I think the goal of doing that is really important. So for me, it's like journaling. I think, we get hung up in the self part of it. If we think of ourselves as the subject and then think of ourselves as a separate photographer, I think that might help, instead of trying to be so critical of everything, the technique, the lighting, as well as the subject. If we can separate ourselves out from that a little bit, I think people might see a little bit more success, or might be a little bit more, might be less hesitant to try it. So that's the way that I've always looked at it.
I really like that you mentioned that it's like a journal, because I think that's absolutely what self-portraits, or at least a practice of self-portraits are, because they are a journal of who you are in a moment throughout time. Um, I do think it's also very critical to note that you don't have to love what you see. That doesn't mean that you can't learn to love, right? It just means that just because what you see looking back or reflected back to you may not always be what you were hoping to see, right? Like we talked a little bit earlier about aging. There are so many different components of, you can appreciate something and not be in love with it. And I think that's a very critical factor when it comes to self portraits, because it is merely an act of self-love by creating it in the first place. And it's appreciating who you are exactly as you are today, even if you hate every single piece of the puzzle that's staring back at you. Because at the end of the day, it is a puzzle, and it is an opportunity for you to learn to appreciate who you are and how you show up just by simply showing up in the first place.
Becca, Dustin, if one of you doesn't go.
I have nothing to add.
I'm kind of in the same boat there.
Thanks,
All
Kat,
right,
for
all right.
reading for us.
Kat, shouldering the weight today, carrying the torch. Sorry, I had a car pass. Yeah, all right. So as we come up to the end of the hour, then I think my encouragement would be maybe even a little bit on the opposite side, or the kind of flip side of the coin. And I think it would be to give yourself permission to know who you are. And the reason I'm looking at it this way is because for me, the exercise of self-portraiture is very much like reflection and being truthful with yourself and honest with yourself, and asking yourself why and how, and all of those uncomfortable questions that we tend to shy away from. And I think for many of us, we know there's a saying. I'm going to see if I can remember how it goes. It is something along the lines of, I am who you think you think I am, or who I think you think I am. So essentially, I'll continue to be the version of me you expect me to see, or that I think you expect me to see. And that's how I'm supposed to show up, because that is who you believe me to be, and I have to manifest that self for you. And we do this most often without thinking when we are engaging with people. And I think the act of self-portraiture, in whatever form it takes, is us asking ourselves who we think we are, and how do we get below that mask of who we expect ourselves to show up as, the versions of ourselves that we believe other people want to see, or that they're expecting from us, or the masks that we've learned to wear in order to be comfortable around other people, or in order to achieve the things that we've set out for ourselves. You know, I'm a professional photographer, and so my self-portrait should look this way. It should be well lit. It should be well composed. It should be all of these things. Or this is the professional version of me I show up as. And so that must be reflected in this work. I think when we do self-portraiture, we get a chance to push beyond that and explore even why we feel that that is the version we should be showing the world. And those questions, just being able to reflect on those questions and ask ourselves and try to answer honestly, I think even doing that helps us understand ourselves more. And the record that gets left behind when we're done is a chance for other people. It becomes a mirror, right? And in a real way, when we make a self-portrait, it becomes a mirror, not only for us to look back at ourselves, but for other people to look in and see some part of themselves reflected in that. And I think no matter, like Kat said, no matter how it turns out, it is a thing of intrinsic value. So I guess that would be my encouragement, my very long-winded encouragement. Anybody have any final thoughts before we start to close the room down?
So are we all going to go make some self-portraits now?
I mean, that's the rule.
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, I've been sitting here thinking this whole time. I'm like, damn, dude, you need to get off your ass and start creating more with yourself. And I feel like it could be something I'd probably enjoy, even conceptually. I do a lot of what I would consider R&D for, for shoots and events that I work at on the computer. But at the same time, like there really is nothing like getting up and setting up some lights, and creating some dope images. So really no excuse not to do it.
I feel the same way, man. I've already got an image in my head that I'm going to try to go make today. So I feel you 100%.
Motivation for the win. All right, y'all. So remember, we talked about self-portraits today, the importance of self-portraits, the way we think about them, how we approach them, that there are really no rules. You don't actually have to be in the self-portrait as long as it is an exploration of you and who you are. And the conceptual piece I want to make, I think probably only my hands will be in. So it will be me, but different. And you can do that too if you are a sculptor or a painter or anything else. However you want to explore who you are, that's what your self-portrait gets to be. And that is the May challenge this month, Self-Portraiture. There is a pinned post in the Facebook group where you can go and share your self-portrait, get feedback from the community, and the portraits, the 5 portraits who have the most reactions will then, of course, go on to speak in the live stream where the 5 of us regular hosts will look at the images, use visual literacy to try to deconstruct what the artist is trying to say and the ways they have gone about saying it visually. And then the image we feel the most connected to will go on to become the banner for the group, and the page will be featured on the website with a Q&A interview about you and a live interview for our podcast with Matt Stagliano. So we're really trying to celebrate the folks who show up to be part of these projects. So if you feel called to make a self-portrait, and it sounds like many of us do, get out there, go do it and make it. You have until the last Wednesday of the month to get that up and in, because the live stream will be on the 4th Thursday of the month. So give it a go. Just remember, the folks who got theirs in before you may end up having more attention, so they have more time. Don't waste any. All right. Thank you to everybody who was here today as part of our conversation on self-portraiture. I hope it was entertaining, if not enlightening. And I hope you will join us this coming Monday at 6 a.m. Pacific time. That is 9 a.m. Eastern for another morning walk with the Artist Forge, where we learn to think like artists. Of course, you can always go check out the website, theartistforge.com, where podcasts and blog posts are up for your information and entertainment. And until then, have an incredible weekend. Go make something amazing, and we'll see you all later. Bye, friends.